in the season, the Lord has shown me that it's not about the followers and the likes. Sometimes I struggle with that. I'm like, okay, so you know that someone likes it by the likes and the interaction and stuff. And so when I don't get that, I'm like, God, why am I even doing this? And he's like, you're doing it for me because I asked you to do it. I know in my mind that you have to be consistent. You have to like build the content. So when one day it does, you know, become a thing, people can go back and watch it. But still, I'm still like, And so having to get over that, it's been a process and like a learning journey.
Hey there, welcome to the CA podcast. I'm Chad. I'm with Alexis.
Hey.
And today we just want to remind you to subscribe, like, share, whatever you can to support us because, hey, you know, we like it when you share and subscribe, and it lets us know that you like what we're doing and you support it, and that's the best.
Yes.
So today, we're going to jump right into the topic. So one of those things that I think is hard when you're, you know, starting out or you're moving somewhere different or whatever is having a support system, right?
Yes. Oh
and
my goodness.
especially when you have one and you leave another one and like you're leaving that area and kind of stepping out and now you're like, oh no, like kind of like on free fall.
Yes.
And it's hard because like I think the basis of everything is like as humans, we need interaction, we need support, we need affirmation. And sometimes there's seasons where we just don't have it. And it makes you really like love the seasons when you had that like support system that really like championing what you were doing and where you were going. So have you been a part of that or had those experiences before?
Yeah, so when God told us to move to West Virginia, I mean, right before that, we were in Texas and we had my family there.
Right.
So even if we didn't have a lot of friends, you know, when you have family, it's a different
that's
kind of comfort and like security. And so when God told us to move to West Virginia, we were like, okay, we don't know anybody. And so that's when I was a little nervous because I'm like, okay, family, you want to come too? And they're like, no, you guys are alone in this one. I'm like, no.
Right.
Because I had a 1-year-old and then I was pregnant. And so I feel like it's a whole different dynamic because you're like,
very different.
Grandparents should be there and you need like a good village. You know, they say it takes a village to raise.
It does.
And so I'm like, but I don't have a village. So what am I going to do?
Yeah.
But it took me really having to open up and be intentional with it to allow people in to rebuild that support system.
Yeah.
But before then, I didn't really, because I didn't know and I was kind of guarded. We didn't have a support system in the beginning because we didn't allow others in.
Wow.
So then it caused us to kind of be isolated and alone.
Right. And the hardest thing to do is to try and build something or like create something when you're isolated and when you don't have that. Because it's one thing, you know, trying to build a family, trying to have kids and have them in the right environment. And then you're like, oh, we're going to launch a business or, oh, we're going to launch, you know, a venture. And it's like, you don't have that support. It's very difficult. And, you know, I think the biggest thing too is like we've seen like with culture architects, like when we started, you know, the people that rallied around us helped us so much morale wise. Cause like, oh, people like what we're doing, you know, and then you go through the seasons where like, no one's watching and it's like, oh man, like if someone would just tell me I'm doing a good job or someone would just say, hey, this is good.
Like validation. Like I didn't know if we're on the right track or if there's something else.
And it's funny because I'm not normally that type of person that needs that. But then I realized like, I think when you're stepping out and doing something that like not everyone's doing. Then it's like, I just need to hear that I'm doing okay. You know, like it's like that. And I think even like with you starting Speak Life, it was one of those things that like you had it for so long. And now like you kind of have this team like rallying around you. So how does that feel going from like kind of where you were trying to push it out to now like you have people like rallying around you?
Man, it feels good. It feels like I have someone that's like sitting there lifting my arms up.
Yeah.
Because like you were just saying a minute ago that sometimes you're like, am I on the right track? Because it's the unknown. No one else is doing it. And so with having a team, I'm like, man, they can see this spot that I maybe didn't see, or they have these ideas that kind of add up to what I'm thinking. And so it just feels like you're soaring instead of sinking.
Yeah. And I think, so for me, like one of the biggest things too is like when we moved here, you know, we kind of knew we were coming into a support system because, you know, you guys, Vinny, Brian, like all these guys that we kind of knew. So it was a good thing because it was like, hey, we're going from kind of security. But then when it comes to like doing all of this, you know, it's one of those things for me where it's like, I know I have the ability to do the back end stuff, but it was one of those things where it was like we were stepping out in ways I hadn't stepped out before.
Right.
So I was having to kind of challenge myself to be like, hey, it's okay if we don't get the validation. It's okay, you know, because I think a lot of times we have like these built-in almost receptors where if we don't get validation,
we're wrong, we're off or something.
Yeah, it's like, like this isn't it, and I think we can throw in the towel because I think a lot of times when we've been in areas where we've had success, if we don't have success that same way, then we can feel it's a failure.
Right.
And I think the other thing too is like a lot of times our success before when we stepped out kind of on our own may have been tied to other people. And so then it's like, well, we've got to find our own path.
Right.
And I think sometimes acknowledging that and understanding that that's how the process works is difficult, but it's worth it because then you understand kind of like, hey, I might not be seeing success the way I used to see success. But now, like, I may have to plow for 3 years before.
Right.
And I think that's the thing is, like, a lot of times we're just in this kind of, like, bubble of, like, oh, well, I tried it. It didn't work. And then it's like, no, like, what if you would have, because I think there always comes to mind the image of
that meme where, like,
the guy, like, and there's the diamond right on the other side. Like, we've all seen that. And it's like, that's the idea is, like, what if you were just one more crack away, one more week away? And so, like, kind of, have you kind of felt that way in, like, things that you've done or things that you've kind of ventured out and do? And, like, how do you push past that feeling?
There's so many times I just wanted to quit. And I'm like, I know that I'm a trailblazer in this specific arena. And so when you're a trailblazer and you're trying to, like, grasp at, like, finding someone to show you, you have to rely on the Lord 100% because there isn't anyone doing it. So you have to be the one to really rely on him to push through. And so all the times that I wanted to quit, I'm like, okay, Lord, I don't know if I can continue to do this. And he's like, you can. And then he'll just show me another step to take. Like he'll show me another nugget. And I'm like, okay, I could do that. Then next thing you know, I'm like running towards that. And then getting out of that rut.
That's good.
So every time it's literally a relying on him process of getting through to the next step.
And that's taking it to the Lord. And saying, I'm at the end of my rope. I need help. And I think that's sometimes what we don't do is like, and I've done it where it's like, I don't know what this is. And just throw it.
It's like hey, frustration.
And I think because a lot of times I think what God wants us to do is realize our reliance isn't on the thing or our gift or what we're stepping on, it's on him. And I think a lot of times our reliance can get exposed where it's on ourselves, on our gift, on our support system even. Because I think a lot of times, I've been, backed by people that really believe in me, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to succeed because of them.
And
then
because
it fails.
Successful.
Exactly. And then it fails. I'm like, okay, God, I get it. I need you. All right. Like, and I think that's where kind of we can make sure that we always have our compass set to that. Because if we don't, I think it is tough because we're not going to succeed without him. We may have success, but we're not going to succeed in the long run. Because I think the grace runs out at some point when you're just operating on your own power and your own thing, because I think I've looked at it and I've seen people in my life that they were just kind of operating outside of the will of God or the grace of God. And, and they were doing well, they had good success. And then finally something just hit and it's just like tanks their life, their personal, everything's just like, it's just almost this weight. It just weighs them down. And I think we've all been there because personally I've been there where it's like, the grace just lifts and you're like, oh, where am I? And it's almost like those scenes in movies where like they wake up and they're like in the desert and it's like that's what you're like, oh no, what did I do? Like and I think that's the way we can avoid that is by going, God, like I can't do this without
my own,
and so I think there's sometimes this mental tug of war because I think one thing I've had conversation with people on is like I think we're all meant for some level of success that we can handle. And then it's like, if we don't hand it over to God and we step outside of that, that's when greed can hit us, all this different stuff.
Crash and burn.
And then you're sitting there and you're like, why didn't this work? And you're like, because you thought it was you. Like, and I think that's where I've been trying to always guard myself is when I have success or when I'm doing things when I'm, success in business, success in this, making sure I'm saying, hey, you know what? The reason I got that, the reason I was able to do that, the reason that went through is because of God.
Right. That's good. And not getting a big head because you get a big head and say, I did this.
Or 100%. And I think one thing too that I observed with Speak Life, which was cool is, so you were doing all these interviews, right? And a lot of them come out now. I think there's like 5 out now, right?
Yes.
And what's cool about it is you were doing these interviews and you were pushing through them and you were doing them and no one knew you were doing them.
Right.
So it's like you did an interview and you did an interview, and it's like you don't know if they're successful or not, but you just kept doing them.
Right.
And so I think that's kind of the example there is like, I I think a lot of times we're feedback-based people.
Yeah.
So we want to hear or see, hey, people enjoyed that or they watched that. And I think that's the tough thing on this side is, we're like, hey, well, let's get some interviews so we can build up like months of content. And what that means is that you don't get the validation
instantly.
Yeah. Right? So can you talk to kind of that and kind of how that felt?
Yeah, I think in the season 2, like the Lord has shown me that it's not about the followers and the likes, because sometimes I struggle with that. I'm like, okay, so in the social media world, you know that someone likes it by the likes and the interaction and stuff. And so when I don't get that, I'm like, God, why am I even doing this? And he's like, you're doing it for me because I asked you to do it. And I know in my mind that you have to be consistent. You have to like build the content. So when one day it does, become a thing, people can go back and watch it. But still, I'm still like, And so having to get over that, it's been a process and like a learning journey. Yeah. But the support here in the office is what keeps me going as well. Right. Not only my reliance on God, but when you guys like, you could do this, like you could get out of the funk, it's okay. Yeah. So that really helps catapult me too to keep going.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's important. And so, like, kind of seeing it on the other side is like, who in your life can you support? Can you really get behind? Because I think a lot of times we love the support, and then we're like,
we're stingy with doing it with others. Yeah, yes.
Our friend starts a business and they ask us to post, and we're like, get around to it. It's like. But I think that's one thing I've been more intentional on is like when friends start things and whatnot, like, hey, like, a share doesn't cost me anything, to buy a shirt from somebody, it doesn't cost me anything, like in the sense of, it might be $25, but it's like, what is that for them to feel that love and feel that support? Because you never know, like, when that share could be the one thing to say, okay, I can keep doing this.
Right. And the crazy thing is with friends, they're like the last ones to support you in something.
Always.
Friends and family.
Is the worst.
I'm like, that's messed up. And so I don't want to be that person. Yeah. I mean, I find myself doing that. I'm like, no, I can't do that.
For sure. Yeah, I'm the same way because I'll be scrolling and I'll be like, I'll share it the next
later.
Time. Yeah.
You know who it is. You're like, I'll make a wait.
Yeah, because I go in my mind, everybody's sharing it right now. Let me share it with me. And I'm like, I completely forget. And then they're like,
I'm the same.
And then the worst thing is there was someone that I did that with. And I was like, I would love what they were doing. And then like 2 weeks later, I saw they quit it. And I was like, oh
no.
Man. I was like,
what if that share?
Yeah, I know. What if that share? But it's that, it's tough because like that type of stuff is like looking at it from this side is like, what can we do to help people?
Right.
And a lot of times, it is that text of, hey man, I saw that. It's really cool. Like, love what you're doing. It's like, what can we do to encourage people? Right. in that arena.
And then you're planting seeds. So if you need that, you should go support someone else and then it's going to return to you.
Sow it.
Right.
And I think that's super important. It's like, hey, what can you sow? Like, hey, you're getting, I guess you could say like, not the best day or you're not having the best, then sow a good day in someone else.
Right. Encourage them.
Yeah. You don't have, you have discouragement. Well, sow encouragement, you have, dismay over things falling apart. Hey, so fruitful. Hey, you're doing a great job. Sow what you can, because I think a lot of times we go, well, what can we do? Right. And it's like, well, you can tell that person like that they're doing a great job. You can encourage that person. You can just be alongside that person. And then it's like, hey, well, so for instance, if you need a support system, right? Be a support system for someone else, right?
One person at a time. Next thing you know.
Yeah. I think that's the thing is like, we need to be the thing that we want. And I think a lot of times it's hard because it's like, it takes a little bit of extra effort. And sometimes it's like, why aren't people doing this for me? But what can we push past that and be that for someone else?
That's good. And I see memes that go around where people are like, it says it takes a village to raise an army, or something like that. Right? Is that the saying? It's not to raise an army. It takes a village to
raise a child,
something like that. Yeah. And so, where's my army or where's my village? They say,
sure.
Like, well, are you, like you just said, are you being that to somebody else? Because you can't just always take.
Yeah.
You have to be able to give as well.
And I think sometimes the other side to that too is like, are you the start of somebody's village? Yeah. Like, are you the beginning of someone's village? And I think because a lot of times, we want things to be established.
Right.
And I think that's how, because we never want to step out. Like, innately as humans.
Yes.
You fear of failure, fear of, well, what if somebody sees me?
Or what if yeah.
And so I think innately that's our nature. So when someone doesn't have a support system, for us to be the first ones to start that,
right,
may feel awkward, but it may be exactly what others need,
right,
to then come around them, because they'll be like, oh, they're support. Oh yeah, I'll support them too. And I think so sometimes we have to be that first, that first step out. And I think we have to be okay with that, know, because we want others to do that for us, but then we're not willing to do it for others.
So how does that even make sense?
Exactly. And so, it's just those type of things. I mean, it's real life situation. Like we've all been through it, like, especially recently with everything we've been doing, seeing like, man, why won't somebody support us? And like, you know what? I'm going to start supporting others.
Yeah.
Like,
and then it feels good when you're like giving.
Yeah.
Not always
it really does. Yeah. And that's, I mean, and I think there's a reason behind that because like, that's how it's meant to be. It's meant to be like, we're never supposed to be holding on to things. Right. You know? And I think when you hold on to things, you can get heavy, like in the sense of, hey, that you carrying all these burdens that you're not supposed to
can hold. So.
Exactly. So
that's good. But one more thing I wanted to add is that, especially with like our houses too, I know for myself, I know I wanted to give back to others and like be a village to somebody else, but then I was like, I don't want you to come into my mess. I don't want you to see like how I really live. Yeah. But then once I knocked that wall down, I was like, whatever. What you see is what you get. That's when I was able to be that for somebody else.
I love it. Yeah.
And so I think sometimes we have to allow others to see our mess in order to have that support system that we're wanting or needing.
Yeah, and that's great because I think a lot of times people will even buy into your mess.
Right.
Like I think people will be like, oh wow, they're just like me.
Yes, relate to it, right? Yeah,
because I think, a lot of times we paint this picture of the perfect person, the perfect family, and the perfect thing, and it's not relatable. But it's not relatable. So it's like I can't even relate to you having a perfect family. So then we try to put off this vibe of a perfect family, perfect person.
You're like up here, and everyone else is like,
and then it's like you're wondering, like, why don't I have a support system? Why do people? Well, you're perfect,
right?
Like nobody can support a perfect person. Like that's very difficult. And so I think that's great. Like opening up yourself, opening up your home, opening up people, and going, hey, like I don't have it together,
right?
But like we can bond on that,
yeah.
And so I love that. Cool. Yeah. Well, you want to pray for people that are kind of going through a season where maybe they don't have a support system or they're not really knowing the next step, and then we'll head out.
So, Father, I just pray for each and every person that's listening to this, Lord. I just pray that if they're in a season of maybe feeling like they don't have that support system, I just pray that you would just begin to show them how they can rely on you to start to bring the people that's needed, their tribe, or whatever word you want to use, to bring them around them, to be able to help lift them up and push them further than they can push on their own, Father. I just pray that they would trust again. If they don't trust, Father, I just pray that you would help them to reveal those areas in their life that they're not letting go of, that they're holding control over, and release it to you so that they could trust again and be able to trust people again, because we can't do this on our own. We can't do this walk on our own. I just pray that you would begin to push people out of their comfort zones, that anyone that's stagnant, anyone that may feel stuck, that you would help move them, even if it's just one step at a time, to be able to allow people to come around again, Father. And I just pray that each and every person that does have a support system, I pray that you would put on their heart to be that for somebody else. I pray that you would help them to give to others as well, so that that person that may feel left out can feel included as well. And I pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right. Well, we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.